Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, June 23rd, 2025. Time for another show. Time for another Middle East war. Time for another election. That's true, too. Time for another measles outbreak. Time for a little bit of everything. More ICE raids. More crazy weirdo lying in the headlines for all sorts of things. All of the above and more. There's lots happening all over the place. And no real way to cover it all. But we have this way, which is pretty good. It's real, but it's not a way to cover it all. That's true. Well, we'll touch on everything that we think we can cram into, I don't know, an hour or two, depending on how things roll. I mean, I'll stay around for the second hour. I just don't know what we're going to do with it. Anyway, it is a Monday. That means Greg Dworkin is already organizing stories behind the scenes. And guess what? They'll probably track that line. And I know that because I guess this now counts as show prep, this thing that we're doing. Now that we've been booted off of Skype and moved over to Zoom, we have the opportunity for occasional pre-conferences, I guess you might say, about in terms of getting ready for the show. Not that I'm ever actually ready at the end of it. I have a better idea of what he's going to do and what we ought to be doing. And whether or not the microphones work. But other than that, I wouldn't say it's entirely being prepared for the show. But at any rate, who could be prepared for such a thing? It's another chaotic weekend, and that's kind of what we're used to. And a Monday is always going to be a roundup of something, horrific from Trump, even if it's just a dumb quote that he has given to newspapers or who knows who. But now that it can involve, of course, war, well, it's obviously going to get just a little bit worse. But all right, that's kind of where we are at the moment. Greg Dworkin has, as I said, compiled a number of fun and interesting things for us to consider, all ripped from the headlines, as it were, and there he is, and the newspaper is here as well. Batman himself, Greg Dworkin. Good morning, Greg. I need to follow that up with that. But yeah, well, there's some news.
Holy headlines, Batman.
Exactly.
Look at this stuff. This is amazing. So today I told you when we were doing our prep, which is to say, is this thing work? Is this thing on? That's a professional prep.
That's it. Did you read the newspaper
I was torn between the New York City mayoral election tomorrow, which
normalcy,
is the Democratic primary.
I like it, yeah.
And Wag the dog, which we'll get to, of course, very important. But then this measles outbreak came up, which was really compelling, and I had to spend time on that too. We'll do that last.
That was the big New York Times great read, as they
I feel lied to, said the person who almost died.
Yeah, well,
yeah, duh.
Yeah, I'm glad they got that sense out of it. I'm sorry they got measles, but yeah, we gotta get up to date on that story and measles in general. Once again, and I gotta find out.
And no, it's not a distraction because nothing is a distraction. It's all relevant. It's all a piece. It's all part of the same thing. It's all being lied to.
Yeah, and in the era of, as you put it, you reminded me of the whole thing. I mean, it didn't occur to me to refer to the kinetic actions over the weekend as wag the dog, but why not? It is, and it's very apt, but you forget kind of where that came from, and I guess once you're reminded of the fact that that's an actual governing principle for Republicans in general, even though it was once coined, meant to be about a Democratic president. The idea that politicians do this, I guess in that context, is it really worth wasting breath and trying to claim that certain things are distractions and other things aren't? I mean, the whole policy is one of distraction.
Right.
Forget
so
about
let's just go with what we think is interesting, which is,
it.
after all, what we do anyway.
Yeah. Right. You can't stop us.
You know, people ask me, how do you put the pundit together pundit roundup together with all this stuff going on. And the answer is really simple. I just put on stuff I think is interesting.
Yeah,
What do you talk about on the show? Well, I just talk about stuff I think is interesting. If it turns out to be news and if it entertains you, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But David and I are just like speaking over breakfast here.
This is really your doing, audience. You're the one interested in this crap. It's not my fault this is an interesting show to you. I just being an idiot. But we happen to have the same interests. That's the idea.
Right. So, speaking, I'm laughing.
Bye, everybody. They all just
because there was a onion ad.
You should be
big onion ad taken out in the New York Times and other places.
We took it out.
And it says, the story says, Congress, now more than ever, our nation needs your cowardice.
Yes. I did see that one, although I like that.
Which is a classic.
More than error.
But more than that.
Yes.
Okay. Is that the onion piece has been sent in like real-time paper to every member of Congress.
Huh.
Okay.
All right.
And when you look at the actual newspaper, which I just sent you at the very bottom of our list we put together.
Oh. All right.
Okay. Is the onion
list.
And then I circled in red.
Oh, wait, I don't want to do it this way. Yeah.
Their motto.
Oh, okay. Let me get to it. Oh, I'm on the wrong computer. Well, that's the problem. All right. Where you actually sent things to is this one. Oh, yes. Oh, has it always been there?
I don't know, but it's there now. So the motto of the onion is Tu Stultus Es, which was sent to every single congressman.
Yes.
And the rough translation in English of that is, you are stupid.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I was like, have I not noticed this before? I don't know if I read I've never seen it, they're doing it in paper now for reasons.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at their other headline, I mean, if you open up the picture of the ad as it appears, you don't see that. So I don't know that it's everywhere.
Okay.
For example, right underneath that, I'll send you what the onion ad looks like.
Okay. I think I'm in it.
Congress, now more than ever, our nation needs your cowardice. Other stories on that same front page entitled Child Expects to Eat Lunch Every Day.
That's your traditional
Christian faith, an important part of who Senator pretends to be.
All right.
I mean, these are all right on the nose.
Yeah. Well, that's traditional onion.
Yeah.
So printing it up on paper is useful.
But adding that motto and sending it to your congressman is just like chef's kiss.
Right. Yeah. That's a good one. I saw it over the weekend, and I did see that motto, and I was like, has that always been there? And I just never noticed that. And because I read individual articles online or something, maybe it's always been in a paper version, which hasn't always been printed, but I don't know.
Who knows?
Whatever they're doing,
Anyway,
they're shaking it up and keeping me
stuff.
interested. Yeah. Then we bombed the country.
Right. And so, and now behind the scenes
we
of
do
the onion. But, we have time for that other story about, World War III. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
So I don't even want to start with that. I want to start with the New York City mayoral election.
Okay. Mayor.
Okay. And there's a fellow, Democratic socialist by the name of Zohran Mamdani.
Right. Zohran speaks. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's running for mayor, and another guy who's running for mayor is Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah. Why? Is he not busy?
And there's a bunch of other also-rans who are running in the Democratic primary, which is tomorrow.
Okay. Good. Finally.
Okay. And New York City is a mostly Democratic area where Republicans win, kind of like Massachusetts, because sometimes the Democrats are just so terrible you have to vote for the Republican. That's how Mike Bloomberg wins, and Ed Koch running as a Republican wins, Rudy Giuliani wins. Some really terrible mayors because sometimes the Democrats just shoot themselves in the foot. This year, however, interestingly enough, the current mayor, Eric Adams, is a Trump Democrat. The party's rejected him. He knows he can't win the primary. He'll be running as an independent.
All right.
And the Republican candidate looks like it's going to be an old name for those of you who have been around the block a few times, Curtis Sliwa.
Oh, my goodness.
Founder of the Guardian Angels, thug, brown shirt, businessman, radio host, loser. He's got a whole bunch of things in his itinerary and CV, and he'll be running as a Republican. He won't win. But the question is going to be Eric Adams versus whom?
Yes, okay.
So it's really a two-person race, Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani. Mamdani's young, he's dynamic, he's a really fantastic campaigner, he's put together an absolutely terrific campaign, he's got baggage, he's offended Jews in New York City, not a good thing when you're running for mayor, by endorsing the idea of globalize the intifada, and then pretending that doesn't really mean what it means. That's like from the river to the sea, but pretending it doesn't mean what it means. You can absolutely positively support the Palestinian cause, but you got to recognize the inflammatory nature of those slogans.
Okay.
If you are trying to get votes in New York City, which has an enormous Jewish diaspora.
Yes.
Okay. And Mamdani therefore has alienated some people, but this is really a generational election. Michael Lang, who's an excellent follow for those who are interested in New York City politics, comes out of, how do you pronounce her name? Nydia Vasquez's office? First name?
Nydia, yeah. Is that, which, who?
Nydia, not Nydia. Nydia.
Nydia, yeah. Nydia, yeah. Yes.
Vasquez. He was a staffer for her, and now he does political analysis for New York City, and very few people get into the nitty-gritty and details the way he does. For example, yesterday he posted, of ballots cast thus far, this is on Twitter, I feel very confident saying Zohran Mamdani's in the lead. Early voting day number 9, Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island voting breakdown. Manhattan 31.9% of the electorate. The Bronx 8%.
What is this? Who have cast ballots already?
Borough by borough, share of the electorate who have cast ballots already.
Okay. Yes.
Brooklyn 37%. Okay, just take those three. Manhattan is vote rich. Brooklyn even more vote rich. Those are Mamdani strongholds.
Okay.
The Bronx is a Cuomo stronghold. And basically the way it breaks down ethnically is that Latinos, blacks vote for Cuomo, hence the Bronx.
Okay.
Whereas Asians vote for Mamdani, white liberals vote for Mamdani, ethnic conservative whites vote for Cuomo.
Yeah, all right.
All right. So Staten Island is a Cuomo stronghold. That's 3% of the vote.
Okay.
Queens, which has a lot of people, is basically split between them depending upon which neighborhood you're in. And Queens has 19.7% of the vote compared to Manhattan 31.9 and Brooklyn 37.1. The more Brooklyn votes, the more Mamdani has a chance to win, to the point where, number one, there is a Polymarket thing out today, this morning, who will win the Democratic nomination for New York City mayor. If you scroll up on the list I sent you, you'll find it easily because it has the Dutch flag at the top, which is to say the New York City flag. Blue and orange.
Yes, right. All right.
Who will win Democratic nomination for New York City mayor? And it was 70% chance of Cuomo until today. Now it's 60% Mamdani. Because people saw what's going on with the early vote. Doesn't mean Mamdani's going to win. Cuomo's still a favorite. Point number 2, data point number 2, Emerson comes out with a poll this morning, final Emerson polling in the final round of ranked choice voting. Mamdani gets 37.8 and Cuomo gets 35. So it's the first legitimate poll in a while showing Cuomo losing.
Okay. I mean.
Right. Sorry, that's round 6. In round 7, it's 52-48 Mamdani. What happens is each time somebody drops out, that's the way ranked choice voting works.
Yeah.
So you go from 9 candidates to 8 to 7 to, whatever. And it's interesting watching how that develops. So you have that going on. So again, New York City is primed for an upset, but nobody knows what the final is going to be. It all depends upon who shows up. And same day voting is going to be bigger than the early vote. However, number one, the early vote favors Mamdani, and number 2, the older Cuomo voters are required to show up tomorrow for Cuomo to win, and it's going to be 101 degrees.
Oh, right. Forgot about the weather thing.
Are older voters going to show up in 101 degree weather and stand online for 3 hours?
Cuomo
If
they're 101, yes, I guess.
Because if they don't, he loses.
Yeah, and if they do,
so this is just a fascinating
nursing
election.
homes.
Yeah, fascinating election.
Yeah,
and again, you have to understand that with all of Mamdani's flaws, he's done something that Bernie couldn't do.
Okay, what was that?
He got the younger voters to show up.
Oh, all right, true, right. That's enormous. It's always been an issue.
That changes Democratic politics completely and totally. Doesn't make me a Democratic socialist. I'm a whoever wins, I'm behind. Forget the grudges. Democrat.
We can't have Curtis Sliwa, for God's sake.
Exactly right. Or Eric Adams, who's a crook and a Trumper. So what happens is, all the people who are correctly and rightly saying, I can't vote for Mamdani. He didn't endorse Harris. He was bad. He did all the things that I hate when people, but look at the three who are running. It's Sliwa and Adams. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that, I'm voting for the Democrat.
Yeah. I
like it. Is he going to be a good mayor? I don't know. New York City runs itself.
There's no having good mayors. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a good mayor. Who do you want, Giuliani?
Right.
Who are you going to remember?
That's
Ed
an
Koch?
issue, right? Right.
We haven't had a good mayor since David Dinkins.
So suppose you're against Mamdani and he's nominated. I mean, you can always justify voting for him anyway by saying all our mayors suck. All right, fine. It's just a matter of which one will it be, which disaster. I've seen this one. This guy, Sliwa, we haven't seen him as mayor or as in politics per se, but he's been around long enough. Everybody knows he's a disaster. Roll the dice, for God's sake. I mean, there's at least a chance out of all of them. If you had to choose, and the three were Sliwa, Adams, and Mamdani, and then you said, which one is most likely to say, all right, I've said some crazy things in the past, but now I got to be mayor, and I'm going to get my head screwed on right, and I'm not going to purposely offend everybody anymore. If you had to choose who's got the best odds of saying that and meaning it, I would think it would be him. It's just my guess. I may be completely off base, and he may have no such intention, but I know neither does Sliwa or Adams. They're known quantities.
Yeah. So here's a Michael Lang piece behind the paywall, unfortunately, but interesting. An election for the ages. Tell me how old you are, and I'll tell you who you're voting for.
All right.
That's basically what it comes down to.
How old do you have to be to vote for Sliwa? Man.
But
that's crazy. Yeah.
As Mamdani says to his constituency, if you're under 30, you weren't even born the last time Andrew Cuomo voted in New York City.
Oh. All right. That's a statement.
Right. And, we talked about this in terms of Ben Wickler and Ken Martin running the Democratic National Committee.
Okay.
I like Ben, but I know Ken, and so Ken won.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Andrew Cuomo has a lead with the black electorate because he is a known quantity.
Mm-hmm.
And especially older black voters don't trust anybody they don't know. With reason.
They probably don't even trust the people they know either.
They do, but better the devil we know than the devil we don't kind of thing.
That might be the extent of it. Yeah, I mean,
right. It doesn't mean that they totally support Andrew Cuomo in terms of what he does, but we know what he's giving us, and we can deal with that.
All right. Yeah, that's probably happening.
Right. So,
but
when Michael Lang writes up the generation gap and where people will vote and where the votes are coming from, he's very colorful. And he's very funny. For example, Astoria, Sunset Park, these are neighborhoods that are very liberal to the point of being willing to vote for a Democratic Socialist, AOC voter, if you want to think of it in your head.
Okay.
And he calls this the commie corridor.
No, yeah. Okay.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Then he's got the
RDR.
No Kings and No Cuomo corridor. That's upper middle class, Manhattan's West Side, for example. The Bloomberg base, which is the affluent neighborhoods in Manhattan, Turtle Bay, places like that. Gentrifying battlegrounds like, and this will surprise you, Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Battleground.
Used to be known in my day as the ghetto.
Yeah. Battleground, but in a different way.
Districts with considerable Southeast Asian populations, like in Queens, he calls the Zomentum areas.
Zomentum, all right.
The Keep It Close areas, diverse outer borough neighborhoods that Cuomo will most likely win, but where Mandani must keep his margin of loss respectable, like he can't lose by more than 20%, and then Cuomo land. And so when you break down all of those, it's a close race, and he's promised us, this particular analyst, a prediction today. Yesterday he said, in the morning I'll have a prediction for it, but it's not out yet.
All right, well, it's still morning.
And people said, well, what time? What time? And he said, look, there's 3 polls out in the field, Emerson and 2 others. You know, let me take a look at those polls before I give you my final, okay?
Nah.
Well, no, it's not okay. I want it now.
Yeah,
but,
right.
you know, it's that's what he's doing.
There's
interesting stuff.
3 more hours.
If you like politics, this is really an interesting place to be.
Yes, even in 100+ degree heat.
Yeah, stay indoors.
Right. It's the best place for your politics, quite honestly.
Right. All right, let's talk a little bit about Wag the Dog here.
Okay.
So we have some polling out today. You go.
Polling about this. All right.
Do you want America to be at war with Iran? No, 85. Yes, 5.
5.
I just want to give you
an
idea. It's like the L.A. incursion by the Marines and the National Guard, which is horrible. And the basic tenet there is if you are seen as the violent side, you lose the support of the American people. That would be the federal government. Uh-oh. And so Trump is tanking on immigration.
Yes.
And when I say tanking, what I'm going to do is fetch you a picture of what I'm talking about here.
Of him riding in a tank like Dukakis.
See, what do? I copy the image and then I paste it where you can see it.
Yeah.
How's
clicky
that
clicky
for
thing.
A plan?
All right.
All right, there it is at the bottom.
This is how you do it on radio. So,
yeah, there it is at the bottom of our list.
Here's a twirly thing that says it's coming. Oh, it looks like a hurricane.
Look at the orange plot. But look at the orange plot. Immigration plunges into the negative territory once LA happens. In the same vein, this is an example of, and you might even say this about Andrew Cuomo as well. People don't care about scandals so much. Edwin Edwards, the only way I lose is if I'm caught with a dead girl or a live boy in bed.
Yeah, right.
Great line. Disgusting, but great line because it's true.
Good idea, though. Yeah.
Trump, the scandal-ridden president, ×2. People don't care about scandals. They care about what they perceive you will do in their daily lives. Trump is such a good liar. It's the only thing he's good at. He convinces people that he's on your side to the point where you get conned and then you vote for him. But people may poll that they like what Trump says or what they think Trump is saying, but they hate what he does. They don't like the way he governs. So when it comes to practical, oh my God, this is what it means, I don't like it kind of stuff, you know, sometimes that's called thermostatic response. You know, whoever's in, you now hate the guy who's in because you don't like what he's doing because he didn't give you the lower taxes but better services thing he promised you or you thought he promised you. So people are looking to see how Trump is actually handling immigration, and they're finding that, no, he's not going after criminals and thugs the way he said he was going to do. He's actually doing your neighbor. You know, a guy in the neighborhood in Southern California has been there for long enough to have 3 sons, all of whom are in the Marines, who gets thrown to the ground and gets beats up by Border Patrol.
Yeah. By the way, where are these Marines that we put in L.A.? What if the Marines show up on the scene of one of those things? Yeah. And find out you're beating up the Marine's dad.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So not good.
Probably. No.
Not good for Trump. And so, you know, again, that's why that poll about, well, what do people really want? We don't want to be at war with Iran. So Trump winds up bombing Iran.
Yeah.
Trying to take out nuclear sites at Fordo, pushed by Netanyahu. The reason he does it is clear. Behind the scenes stuff shows that he was really impressed and annoyed at the same time with what Israel was doing with their campaign against Iran. He loved how it was going, wanted to be part of a winner, and so he was pushed to take credit. And the way to do that was to let Netanyahu talk him into doing this. They bomb Fordo with these bunker-busting bombs. He declares right away complete and total victory, just like over the Houthis.
Yeah.
Turns out not to be true the next day.
Yeah, that was unusual.
Let me say that again.
It
turns out not to be true the next day.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen that?
Many.
Okay. And it turns out that the nuclear material, because Trump was broadcasting his intent on social media,
2 weeks. Yeah.
The Iranians moved all the stuff.
What?
The bunker-busting bombs didn't get down to destroy everything. We're in a much worse situation today than we were 4 days ago, because what would be the incentive now for Iran not to build a nuclear bomb? North Korea does it. You don't bomb North Korea.
Yeah.
Because it's a good preventer of war in their eye, in the Iranians' eyes. So why shouldn't they go ahead and make a nuclear bomb? Now, obviously, negotiating with the U.S. is useless because they lie, and while they tell you they're giving you 2 weeks, they go ahead and they try to set things up to destroy you. And by the way, Trump now says what he wants is regime change, and if they didn't get everything, they'll just have to go back and do it again. So the whole idea of one and done, we got everything, we're wonderful, our military's terrific, look at, none of it's true.
Yeah, I don't know why he set himself up for that. Well, he's
very an idiot,
dumb, I guess. Oh yeah, that's right.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see, we left off by saying, the best explanation for what happened here is that the president is incredibly dumb. Mind you, by the way, over the weekend we were offered the explanation of the past couple decades of endless Middle East wars by JD Vance, who says the big difference between the previous decades of endless Middle Eastern intervention and current endless Middle Eastern intervention is back then we had dumb presidents, whereas now I didn't even actually bother finishing that.
Accusations are confessions.
That's every single time, and I'm seeing that more. I'm seeing that more and more these days. It's been very successful in getting it into opinion pieces and headlines elsewhere by mainstream journalists. Everybody knows it now. Every accusation is a confession, and here we are.
So let's talk about what the actual experts who aren't idiots think about all of this. This is Mark Hertling, who's a tanker, retired soldier, as he says.
Oh, okay.
He teaches leadership. What concerns me tonight, safety of 30,000 U.S. troops in the Middle East, cybersecurity, because our capability of fighting it was gutted by Doge. Economic strength, where they oil prices and tariffs. And we'll talk about oil prices in a minute. They're not going to spike, but they are going to go up. Allied assistance and intelligence flow, we'll need that now more than ever. And domestic intelligence, and again, we got a 22-year-old in charge of counterterrorism.
Yeah,
just at a time where you need all this stuff.
Nah.
So what's the reaction of Republicans and MAGA? Just predictable. Nothing's going to happen, and if it does, it's Biden's fault because he had open borders and let all these people in.
Yeah, so boy, are they becoming expert in finding ways of blaming previous administrations.
Not even previous administrations.
Everything.
It's all Joe Biden's fault. Whatever it is, it's Joe Biden's fault.
Even if he had not been the president.
Yeah, exactly. World War II is Biden's fault, too.
Yeah.
So all of the points that Hertling brings up are relevant. This is Juliette KM, who's
Hello,
domestic and expert on things terrorist.
When we say domestic maven, we mean domestic politics and domestic terrorism.
Yeah, Pete Hegseth is defense secretary, failed campaign against the Houthis, wasted military resources in California, incomplete mission objectives in Iran. Great job. In fact, it was reported that both Gabbard and Hegseth were isolated from Trump's decision-making, which was based on what he saw on Fox News for the most part. Chris Murphy, our senator, said, I was briefed with the same information that the speaker and everybody else got. There is no imminent threat.
Oh, well, that's why this administration doesn't, stops the briefings at the bare minimum, and apparently didn't even reach all the bare minimum Gang of Eight either.
Right. Remember the BBC dad, Robert Kelly, whose kids ran in on him when he was doing a national broadcast. So he writes, always remember Trump's core flaw is incompetence. Everything else flows from that. His appalling staff choices, absurd speeches, authoritarian governing style because he doesn't understand the Constitution and can't read.
But that's okay.
Lazy stereotype-ridden ideology because he won't read. And the New York Times says Trump's incessant tweets giving away his war plans convinced the Iranians to hide the uranium. And they forced the Air Force into having B-2 bombers flying to Guam in the other direction of Iran to distract Iran because Iran was following everything on social media.
Yeah, and everybody saw these. I saw that, in one of the New York Times reports was that they felt like they had to have a misdirection and send bombers in the other direction, although I don't know what that was supposed to do exactly, but and then the Times went on to report, flight trackers watched the westbound bombers, but the eastbound bombers crossed the Atlantic undetected. However, I have detected social media detection of those eastbound bombers, and it was the first thing I saw. Somebody saying, I just saw 9 B-2 bombers
flew over my house in Missouri.
Yeah, right, eastbound from,
not westbound, but eastbound, so something's going on.
Yeah. So,
and of course, Stephen Bannon,
New York Times missed that.
Steve Bannon said on his show, there's going to be a big party this weekend. So he told everybody because the only people that Trump consulted was Bannon and people like him, not Hegseth and
Interesting,
and experts.
Because I thought that Bannon I had read in one of these articles too. Well, he was scheduled to have lunch with the president, and that he was against bombing Iran. So people were like, oh, good, we won't bomb Iran this weekend because he's having lunch with Steve Bannon. And, last person to talk to him wins.
He probably had dinner with somebody else.
That's the issue. Not only is it the last person who talks to him, but I also find it amazing that, again, people are just now catching on to, you should laugh out loud when he says 2 weeks to something.
Yes.
Just because of how funny it is that he says it.
Yeah, because he's lying. That's his signature. Yeah. He's lying. Well,
it's just a thing.
That's his tell. If you're playing poker and you start blinking in one eye when you're nervous about your hand,
okay,
that's his tell.
Yeah, I just find it funny that he says it so often, even if it doesn't tell us anything.
It tells us everything. It tells us he's lying.
The other thing that cracks me up is that he's meeting with somebody. Oh yeah, is it lunch or dinner
or golf?
Because everying is meal.
He's having hamburgers,
and even golf is a meal
at the 19th hole.
Yep. Even the golf includes meals that he just, I don't know. I guess he grew up in that era too. The power lunch era, right? But he was never one for a power breakfast because he's not going to get up that early.
Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, right. True. Oh gosh, yes. And the other part of the story of the kinetic actions over the weekend was, it sounds like they tried to keep Pete Hegseth, like they at least paid special attention to making sure. Now remember, don't tweet this and don't put it in any Signal chat groups to your friends. This is supposed to be a secret. But then, of course, the Pentagon saying, well, I don't know which one of them is going to blab, but we better actually spend money flying stealth bombers in the other direction. Even though if you're bombing Iran, I'm not certain which direction is the more
depends where
likely
you are
anyway.
in the
So I guess that's something too. Like
right.
you go west, you're going to go to like
flying from
Guam
California,
and Diego
you go
Garcia.
west, but flying from the middle of the country, you're going to go east.
I don't know. Anyway, apparently they're worried about the top command people could blab. Whoops. Oh well, the civilian oversight.
Nicholas Miller, who's a academic government
type
associate professor of government studies at Dartmouth, writes, I'm old enough to remember when the JCPOA, that's the agreement that Obama had with Iran, was relentlessly criticized for only setting Iran's nuclear program back 15 years. Meanwhile, a report that he tweeted said, U.S. officials and independent analysts believe the Pentagon's Saturday bombing and the 2 other Iranian nuclear sites following more than a week of separate Israeli attacks extended the time Iran needs to produce weapons-grade uranium by months.
Months? 15 though, so that's good. Then or 16 months.
2 weeks.
The number is the issue. Yeah, right. That's 14 days, so they need an extra day or two. I don't care what unit of time I just want a larger number. 15 years, I want 16 minutes.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And now apparently they moved around much of this material, or they worry that they may have moved it around, and we apparently, no longer know where it is, but I don't know if you can ever say that. If you're allowed to say things like, well, we know where it is. It's east, west, south, and north somewhat.
Right.
Like we did with Tikrit, then sure, we're fine. We're covered.
At the very bottom of the list is a tweet with a video. There's nothing to play in terms of over the air, but you should watch it for your amusement.
Oh, my own edification.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
it's Trump's announcement, because when he has an announcement, he has to surround himself with people because, he's afraid to be out there alone.
Okay.
So it's Trump in a straitjacket, with Neanderthal JD Vance on one side and little Marco, who comes up to Trump's elbow on the other, and a drinking Pete Hegseth while he's making the announcements. It's really a very amusing video.
All right.
AI finally achieved its promise here. And, it's cute.
Burned a lake on this one, but yeah, I get you.
So what's really going to happen? I was worried about closing the Strait of Hormuz, but probably not so much worried about that after I saw some of the data on this. And what do I mean by that?
I don't know.
Oil producers and consumers impacted by the Strait of Hormuz, put together by gas buddy guy Patrick DeHaan, who knows something about the price of gas.
Yeah.
Okay. He predicts price of gas will go up by probably 10, 15%. It's not going to spike to $15 a gallon. It'll probably be $3.50 wherever you are, which is a hike.
I don't want that.
But not a disastrous hike. It'll contribute to inflation, all the things Trump said he was going to help with and didn't. But here's the deal. Exporter, Saudi Arabia, through the Strait of Hormuz, about 6 to 7 million barrels per day. Where does it go? Here's the important part. Where does it go?
I don't know.
China, India, Japan, Europe.
Oh.
Iraq, 3.5 million barrels a day. Where does it go?
Oh, I see. Okay.
China, India, Europe. UAE, 2.5 million barrels per day. Asia. Kuwait, 2 million. Asia, especially Japan. Iran, 1.5 million barrels per day. China. So
we don't
the point
do that
is
very much anymore.
That the Strait of Hormuz is not going to be closed or mined, because if they did, Iran would be cutting off its own exports to China, one of its allies.
Yes.
It's not going to happen.
I remember this
Not
from a
gonna
long
happen.
time ago. That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. I saw Straits of Hormuz and, it brought me back and said, oh yeah, that's what they
that's what they do,
And
right? That's not what they're going to do this time.
No. We used to reflag people's tankers.
Right.
Kuwaiti tankers in order to prevent that from happening. But then, I don't know, the profile of the exports certainly has
changed. But the world has changed. Strait of Hormuz is Asian oil traffic.
Yeah.
And it is not in Iran's interest to cut off their own allies and nobody else. It's not going to hurt anybody else but Iran.
No. I remember so many details of this old Straits of Hormuz policies and the politics of it. I'll remind you also I don't know whether this has changed, but it used to be that the enforcement of closing the Straits of Hormuz was land-based missiles in Iran bought from China. Silkworm missiles they used to use. Who knows whether it's like 30 years old now. I have no idea whether they would still use them, but that would also be problematic if you used missiles you bought from China to cut off the oil supply to China. They also would not like that very much.
Right.
So I don't know. They may well produce their own missiles by now.
So G. Elliott Morris sums up.
Just putting that out there.
The Pundit Roundup, strength in numbers. Polls, Americans oppose U.S. bombing of Iran. It'll be really interesting to see what happens when the polling shakes out. Keep in mind that when it comes to immigration especially, but also when it comes to Iran, the wording of the poll is going to determine what the results are.
Right. Like no one here speaks Farsi, so don't do the poll that way.
Yeah. But if you say, are you for war with Iran? The answer is no. But do you support the bombing of Iranian nuclear facilities?
Sure, why not?
Well, yeah, if it's successful. Well, do you support the bombing of Iranian facilities if it's a failure? No. I mean, so you can't look at the polling other than to say, if you do not see here, if you look at the polling and you do not see a post 9/11 George Bush level spike in favor of what the president says and does, then it's a failure, and just wait and see what happens when it all shakes up. And we're not seeing that spike. That's not what happened. And it didn't happen in L.A. with the National Guard nationalization either, and won't. And so don't be afraid of criticizing him. And Democrats aren't. Democrats in Congress are very much criticizing what Trump is doing. This is not Iraq all over again in that regard. Mm-hmm. It is in terms of stupid mistakes, maybe even dumber, but with less consequence or more consequence, we don't know yet because it has to shake out. What is interesting is that when you look and see how this is being covered in the media, this is Scott Lemieux pointing this out.
Okay. What's up, Scott?
News analysis in the New York Times. U.S. military is pulled back into Middle East wars.
Pulled back, are we?
Yeah, Scott Lemieux points out the hardest rule of Beltway journalism is Republican public officials have no agency and bear no responsibility for choices fully within their discretion.
They
were pulled into this. They had no choice. We had to do it.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Basically, I don't know. Our media.
I don't understand what is wrong with the New York Times that they do this all the time and think this is clever. The Onion is so much more on point.
Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen some right-wing publications also going a little crazy. I mean, where was this? I don't remember, but I saw somebody saying this is that Trump had made a Churchillian decision here in intervening in the decision to bomb, like it was some sort of international pragmatic genius of sorts. But yeah, even the mainstream, they love, wars are exciting to cover for them. And so I guess they kind of like it when somebody gives one to them. I don't know why and I guess if someone takes one away, like withdrawing from Afghanistan, they're furious.
Yeah.
Even though the Afghanistan one was over.
Yeah.
So we left.
Yeah. And so what do? They make sure that Afghani interpreters who helped us get screwed by kicking them out of the country and giving them back to the Taliban.
Yeah.
Oh, and I would remind everybody, because people do forget, during Trump's first term, on the anniversary of 9/11, he wanted to invite the Taliban to Camp David.
Right. To have lunch.
But let's yell at Joe Biden about Afghanistan.
Yeah. Fantastic. I don't know. They just, maybe he thought he would start a war at Camp David.
Wag the dog.
That was good.
So, Jeff Timmer, who's an ex-GOPer, who's a never-Trumper, now part of Project Lincoln, writes, Trump's bombing of Iran's nuclear sites needs to be evaluated based on what we know about Trump. And he wrote this yesterday.
Oh, boy.
Number one, he never has a strategy. Number two, he's impervious to reading. Number three, he's impervious to learning or understanding. And number four, he lies. Lies all the time about everything, big and small. Trump has forfeited the benefit of the doubt. We should
Mostly
be deeply
big.
skeptical of yesterday's mission and any information or further action to come. Remember, it was only Saturday. Today's Monday. This happened 2 days ago. So we're still trying to figure out what the hell happened. Yeah. Trump is a liar. Right. He's an idiot, incompetent, and inexperienced. People surround him, so he's got that right. Jeff Timmer does. Since the past is a precursor, Trump's bombing is likely reckless, failed to achieve the objective, especially since he divvied and flailed publicly for so many days. He was right about that. After the Israelis acted and the Iranians had ample time to relocate the most critical nuclear materials, Trump's action reeks of political desperation in addition to whatever fetid, malodorous putrescence he routinely emits.
Holy moly.
Unlike past strikes under the War Powers Act, which at least not at the Congress, Trump gave no real notice. He's trashed our intel community for years. And by the way, Republicans in the Gang of Eight, intelligence folks were notified. The Democrats were not.
Although I'm a little confused about Chris Murphy saying he
got a later update.
Exactly. He got it afterwards.
Afterwards.
Oh, by the way, we did it.
The Republicans were told beforehand this was coming. The Democrats were told afterwards that it happened.
Well, really, what does time mean?
Yeah. So no evidence showed Iran posed an imminent threat. So where's the intel? This feels like a stunt to flex strength as Trump grip weakens. With GOP dissent from Thomas Massie and MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, both of whom absolutely do not support what's going on here. And he did not win them over. These strikes aren't about security. They're a dangerous distraction from a flailing presidency. Nothing is distraction. It's all part of how he's incompetent.
Says. Yes. Okay. Right. They're very, So the Republicans, I don't know what Massey said. He could say anything, but Marjorie Taylor
said
Greene,
this is wrong. This is illegal. It shouldn't have happened. Trump went after him on Truth Social and said Kentucky has to get rid of this guy. And Massey said, I'm right.
Okay. You can tell by the reaction I got. Marjorie Taylor Greene just basically said, I campaigned on we're not going to bomb Iran and my kids are combat age, but I still love Trump a lot on just about everything. I just didn't like this thing.
Yeah.
So no major split there.
So let's step back and look at a 50,000 foot view of all of this, which we just did. And then you hone in on, what does this mean practically speaking? Public policy polling released yesterday, a few days ago, June 18th, June 19th polling, Iowa 1st Congressional District. The incumbent there is named Marionette Miller Meeks.
Right, okay.
Democratic challenger is Christina Bohannon. And in the Iowa 1st Congressional District right now, Christina Bohannon 43, Miller Meeks 39, undecided 18. Miller Meeks again is the incumbent.
Didn't she win by one vote something?
It was a close election, but and the undecided 18% will decide. But things are not going so well for Republicans is what I'm trying to say. And then they've got this big vote coming up this week on the one beautiful bill in the Senate. So I cannot predict what's going to wind up happening with the bill because you never know. It's Republicans in the Senate. I do know that the parliamentarians are stripping a whole lot of stuff out that's bad.
Yes. And I guess I didn't know what to expect because they're normally all this stuff would fail the Byrd rules.
And it is, at least as far as the parliamentarian.
What are they going to do? Yeah.
So again, remind us, the parliamentarian doesn't have a vote. The chair will say, well, I don't care. I'm doing this anyway. The parliamentarian's ruling allows a Democrat to say, point of order, Mr. Chairman, that's against the Byrd rule. Then they vote on it.
Yeah.
So you have to vote to overturn the chair or something like that. Did I get that right?
Something like that,
but you're not voting against the parliamentarian. You're voting against the chair.
Right. The chair just announces what he or she feels like saying. He thinks the parliamentarian they don't have to consult the parliamentarian at all. They could just say, well, we like it just fine. So you could rule any way you want. But you would be entitled to, at all points, raise a point of order and say this violates the Byrd rule. Even if the parliamentarian didn't show up for work and say anything, you can still, you should know that this violates the Byrd rule. The majority can move to override that. And normally it would take 60 votes to do it, but I guess you could just say, today 50 equals 60. Can we get away with that? Do we think we have the political positioning to do it? And it's not clear that the Republicans really want to bother with that. Some of that stuff is awful, and all of it is awful, and they don't care for it, so they might be just as happy to take it out. And that's also something they can use to Bigfoot the House. Well, sorry, it didn't clear the bird rule. It wasn't us. It's the rules. And they're just as happy to hand that back to the House and say, and by the way, while you're there, you should also change your numbers to match ours.
Right.
So maybe they'll do that. Yeah. And I don't know how it's going to go. But some majorly stupid things are coming out.
Do you remember how we started the show?
No.
I do.
It's an hour ago. Yeah, what?
Yeah, it was an hour ago, right?
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about New York City mayoral contest.
Yes, right. Okay, I do remember that.
All right. Michael Lang is out with his finally official. I looked at all the polls. I predict Zohran Mamdani will win the Democratic primary for New York City by less than 1%.
Oh. So vote, everybody.
Or unless you're a Cuomo person, don't vote.
Right. And if you aren't a Cuomo person, don't.
And you don't live in New York City,
remember this. Don't
vote.
put his. Oh, yeah. Well, don't do that. But, everybody was urging people, don't even give Cuomo a ranking so that he, remember this is ranked choice voting.
Yes.
So
don't rank him fifth.
People
don't rank him at all.
Yeah. You could just leave him out.
Leave him out.
There's no rule that says you have to put him in there just because he's on the ballot. If you don't like the guy, then you don't do it. All right. Well, it's a prediction. I'm always astonished by people who will hold themselves to the prediction game. Me, I always say, I don't know, and I don't want to look dumb either. And who says I have to predict anything? I don't.
Right. However, I will say this. Adam Carlson, another reformed pollster, recovering pollster, he calls himself, must read from one of the smartest minds in New York City politics, referring to this piece. And given everything that's going on, if you make your own ranked choice spreadsheet and stuff like that, it's a toss-up.
Oh, my God. Why would you do
It's a toss-up. So you don't have to predict a toss-up. You just have to acknowledge Cuomo is not an overwhelming favorite anymore. That's really the message.
Okay. And if you tell people, that's a good way of putting it. I predict somebody's going to win, but it's going to be within 1 percentage point. Obviously, I could be totally wrong, but it also means go vote. And that's a good message.
Yes. Even
if it's hot.
I'm sending you a Truth Social message from Donald Trump this morning because I think it's important to keep in context. Capital letters. Everyone, keep oil prices down. I'm watching.
What?
I thought you'd find that amusing.
Well, I'm watching TV.
What kind of country tells people how to set prices? Remind me. I'm losing the train of thought here. I'm losing the big picture.
I believe some of them live in New York and they're youthful communists.
In the commie quarter, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Everyone, I'm watching. Well, good. We've got to go make stickers now. We got to make I did that stickers.
Don't raise your prices. The government says don't raise your prices.
Sure. Everyone, don't. I'm watching. All right. Oh,
Aaron Rupert sent that dumb. And said that Chairman Mao is posting and seems agitated this morning.
Yeah. Well, you got to have a little red book because his hands are so little. He can only turn the pages on a little book.
Right.
All right. Well, cool. Amazing. All right. Well, we'll watch him watch, I guess. One last piece here. This is from Financial Times. It's looking at the money that's been put into the New York City mayoral race. Okay.
And what stands out is that Brad Lander, Zohran Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, essentially campaign and public funds match each other in regard to how much money they're putting in.
No.
But there's another, and they're between their campaigns and matching funds, they have about $7 to $10 million spent on this.
Okay.
But another $25 million is all for Andrew Cuomo in super PACs. And that's Mike Bloomberg money. Just so you know.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense, I guess, right? That's who the Republican guy would choose.
But, well, it's the billionaire doesn't want the socialist.
Yeah. And all right.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
I can understand why that would happen. He's not going to, I don't think, well, although that would be interesting, commandeer all your money and take it and distribute it in New York City.
Well, I just want to remind people that when it comes to throwing money into a race, didn't help Bloomberg for president much.
That is true. He does not have a good record.
There's a track record of him throwing billions around and losing anyway. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
It's a little late, and it won't make it any cooler. That's one thing. You cannot buy cooler temperatures outside, even with $1 billion. So all right. We'll wait and see, but you don't have to wait a very long time. Just remember when you're confronted with your ranked choice ballot, just because your guy is on there doesn't mean you have to give him a trophy and rank him. You can leave him out. And Brad Lander, made a big splash the other day. That's another guy. If you feel like I don't want to just put one person down, although you can. Bullet voting, I think they used to call it. Well, again,
I'll end this discussion about New York City politics because we'll come back to it on Wednesday. If Cuomo has a 3% lead in first round voting or less, he's probably going to lose. But I will just end you with this. From New York City politics, a lot of people don't know what's going on, but everybody has a strong opinion.
I do not. Oh, yeah, I think so. I've been trying to have only weak opinions about that.
Well, you can't. If you're at or around New York City, you could be uninterested, but you're going to be inundated with this stuff thanks to Mike Bloomberg's money. And it's going to be what happens to the third place guy, Brad Lander's ballots, because he'll be in a relatively strong third position. It's ranked choice voting, and he's cross-endorsed Mandani.
Okay.
And in fact, they campaigned together.
Okay.
And so me personally, I'm ABC. Anybody but Cuomo.
Oh, okay. That still works. Right. I forgot about the way we used to use that. All right. I just remember it from schoolyard stuff about ABC gum.
Yeah. Already been chewed.
No, I don't want that.
No, I don't want that. Take it off your nose.
All right. Well, all right, great. Thanks, Greg. We'll check back in with you after they have finished this whole voting thing, but probably not the counting. That's the time to check. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and now it's just the Kagro in the Morning Show. Greg's gone, and we didn't get to everything that there is under the sun because, of course, that was the first 5 minutes, first 15 minutes we talked about. Oh, we're never going to be able to talk about all these things, and if we had just spent 5 minutes on that and 10 minutes on the other things, well then, right, we would have had a much better track record. However. One of the things we like about the week is that there are more days in it than just Monday, and that'll give us a chance to catch up on Wednesday. Although then it'll be about the New York City mayoral race again too, because it will be over, and we may or may not know who won the nomination because ranked choice voting, but they do use computers to do that, so we may actually know who won. Anyway, but we'll be back to that, and that'll be fine, and then. Then after a while we'll be bored with it. Okay, enough New York City stuff. We'll move on to other things. We may or may not have bombed Iran again at that point. I don't know whether it counts as a second round or this is just a continuation of round one. We'll see. Anyway, I put aside lots of things over the weekend in Pocket, and then I remembered, Pocket is shutting down. So I think I have until July 8th to get... I guess you can use it to still store things. You can still save things there up to July 8th. But after July 8th or maybe beginning on July 8th, no more storage. And then you have a couple of months to download all of your saves. And I think I do want to do that. I think it would be fun to look back at the archives. But now I have to come up with a new read it later system, which shouldn't be hard because I think there's a lot of competitors. But because I've never had to look, I think I used to use one at first, and I just did not love it. Pocket has just been easy and simple, but it's a little too simple. So, all right. Anyway, we'll see what we can come up with as an alternative. But I put a lot of blue sky posts, which I still don't like calling anything at all, aside, because there were just a lot of people making very good comments along the way. And also, I put a couple aside from Greg Sargent because Greg Sargent was picking out key points in very long New York Times articles that it might be difficult to get through the entirety of the New York Times work. And so it might be best to first jump out and say, here are the really good points that are being made. However, I don't like doing it that way because I like reading up all the context, and it's somehow more interesting and fun to get around to that one point. But what if I don't, right? What if we don't make it? So here's what I'll do. And this is a little awkward, but I got to jump back and forth into all of the different Blue Sky posts. One, to make sure I got the right one, and two, then read you these things that people called out. And there are a lot of things. And it's not just necessarily in the last or the analysis of these New York Times pieces either. There's an awful lot happening here. So let's see. Gosh, man. All right. So let me first say, all right, yesterday and Saturday, Trump spent a lot of time, bragging about things, bragging about the strike on social media, mostly in his own Truth Social. And that brought up a couple of other things, a couple of other points being made. Like, for instance, Aaron Rupar, I think, grabbing Trump's Truth Social post, which was thanking the pilots who carried out the strike by saying, the great B-2 pilots have just landed. He's got to, of course, be the first one to break that news and to, probably compromise operational security. Probably not a wise thing. It's certainly not wise like Pete Hegseth did a couple weeks ago, telling people where the pilots are going to be later when they're over enemy territory. You definitely don't want to do that. But it's probably also a bad idea just generally to say they left at this time and they landed at that time, because who knows what you can calculate out from that and the intelligence you can glean. But he doesn't care. He doesn't understand that. The great B-2 pilots have just landed safely in Missouri. Thank you for a job well done! 3 exclamation points. And then he goes into third person to thank them again. But I love that, everybody's got to enjoy that there's a typo in his own name. So Donakd J. Trump, or Do Naked, if you prefer to read it that way. Donakd J. Trump, President of the United States, all in caps. So first of all capping your own name, and then all capping your name and spelling it wrong. It's the next key over. I understand typos happen, but you got a whole apparatus for communications there in the White House. You could use that, but no. He likes to go directly to everybody with his mistakes. And I meant it that way, and I said I could spell my name either way, Donakd or Donald, but to do it all in caps. And, of course, the message itself. Underlying it all is that the message is dumb. Thank you. You've just landed. Great job. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. Exclamation point. So he does it as though this was the signature on the post, which is, of course, unnecessary, but whatever. I don't know. That was just to sort of set the tone for, oh my God, we're ruled by idiots. But we haven't even gotten to the important stuff yet. So I just want to point that out, the Donakd J. Trump. There was also this interesting thing, which was that the Trump administration spokespersons that they put on the air all weekend to explain what was going on were, I guess, had been instructed to say, now remember, you're not going on there and saying this attack was aimed at neutering, to the extent that you could do it with these attacks, and they did not, but you could have neutered Iran's nuclear capabilities or nuclear aspirations, right? And they were trying to sell the idea that that's all we were doing. This is not about starting a war for regime change, as was the case, say, in Iraq. And everybody was, I guess, instructed to be careful to say so. And so they did, but it didn't matter because Donald Trump rug pulled on them, and that's just sort of what he does in life in general, and screws up the work that other people do to try to, stay on message. Where is this one? So there was somebody compiled the messaging from over the weekend that everybody was involved in. And, Marco Rubio saying this is not about regime change, and JD Vance saying it's not about regime change, and this one and that one, the other one saying it's not about regime change. And then Donald Trump saying, you know what I was thinking about? Regime change. That's what we're going to do. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, he says on True Social. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA, would you say MIGA or MIGA? MIGA, make Iran great again. And somewhere in here, that one was just someone grabbing his Truth Social post, but somewhere in here is the compilation of everybody saying, by the way, we were supposed to not be talking about this as regime change, and then all of a sudden, poof, there goes everything. And one of these in here is probably that, but who cares at this point? Let's move on to some other material from this. So New York Times had like 2-3 big articles about this, trying to analyze this stuff after the fact. And I guess the big one here is shifting views and misdirection. I guess how Trump decided to strike Iran, but there are several big articles. Which is the one that I'm not certain which one it was that Greg Sargent was referring to. There's also Inside Trump's Decision, which is a slightly different one, where the Times in the morning newsletter, right? The Times pieced together the days and hours leading up to the president's decision to strike Iran. And this is where we found out essentially that he had been watching on television and possibly reading clips in the newspaper about how Israel's strike against Iran had been reported on as like some brilliant maneuver, and he wanted to be a part of it. And I guess, well, maybe at this point it's just best for us to jump in and read these things, but I'm just trying to find all these stupid. It's very difficult. One of the things I'm looking forward to is a possible replacement for Pocket is something that will display the posts better so that I can see the damn things and figure out which one I need on the air a lot faster. Well, all right. I don't know. And maybe it's also possible it's beginning to look like some of the ones that I liked from Greg Sargent didn't make it into Pocket, and that sometimes is the case too. Things are a little iffy. But then I also grabbed this other one from Steve Metz, who is a writer, as he says, on national security policy and strategy, and writing a book about the future of insurgency as well. And Steve Metz had commented, of all the explanations for Trump's attack on Iran, I find the idea that Israel's air campaign was playing well, quote unquote, playing well on Fox, and Trump wanted some of the adulation. That explanation he finds most persuasive, which is amazing because it should be like, no, that's idiotic. There's no way that a president of the United States would operate that way. Oh yeah, right, Donald Trump. It certainly accounts for the absence of any overarching strategic logic and the incomprehensibility of the objectives. That is true. And most of the people I spoke to over the weekend about things were basically puzzled, like, I don't understand. How does Trump get money or a hotel deal out of this? Why is he doing this? This is literally how they interpret any actions by Trump. Well, where is the money that he's making from this? And if you can't find it, you're not going to be able to understand the true motivations of what's going on. Well, I don't know. Anyway, now I see, maybe I ought to be looking at Blue Sky. I'm sure I must have reposted, or whatever we're calling it these days, the Greg Sargent thing, because it was very good and on the mark, but, might take me a minute to find it. But at any rate, the idea certainly was easy enough to say. There we are. Amazing. Greg says, New York Times has more confirmation that Trump's decision to bomb Iran was motivated in large part by the way the Israeli strikes were, quote, playing on Fox News, which drove him to want credit for it. And if I read correctly in skimming these pieces that he took out from here, essentially, as reporters began to look to the president for anything, but for comment on the whole situation that with Israel first striking Iran, he was telling them, of course he was being supportive of Israel's decision to do so, but then he began sort of drifting into, and by the way, just want you to know, I mean, I can't tell you too much about this, but because it's so super secret, but a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of people are saying that it was me, Donald Trump, who was most influential in getting this done. You missed it because it's all very secret, but behind the scenes, a lot of this was my thinking, my doing. It was me, Donald Trump, who had this success in Iran. Well, but the Israelis carried it out. Yeah, but it was my idea. All right, well, they're not printing that enough. So why don't we bomb Iran? And then they'll have to believe that it was my idea because I'm the president of the United States. And that's it. That's the entire motivation. And who could believe it? It's so crazy, but there you have it. So the big long one here is shifting views and misdirection. That's the first of the New York Times articles that I stuck away here. Shifting views and misdirection, how Trump decided to strike Iran. When Israel began its assault on Iran, President Trump kept his distance. But within days, he was on a path that led to an extensive bombing mission aided by political and military ruses. And they're doing their best to make it sound like there's a strategy and real thinking going on here. Well, we're going to have misdirection. But it isn't him misdirecting. It's other people misdirecting in the hopes that Donald Trump, if he's going to leak information, it'll be the wrong stuff. Mark Mazzetti, Jonathan Swan, Maggie Haberman, Eric Schmidt, Helene Cooper all get credit on the byline here. And I guess maybe some of them like Trump. Just maybe they're jumping in at the end. I want some credit for this. That's the most amazing thing out of this whole bit. And that's what Greg Sargent pulled out. But let's have all the information we can here. Standing at the lectern, right, not podium, lectern at the White House briefing room on Thursday afternoon, Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, read a message she said came, quote, directly from the president. And I think we made fun of this on Friday because not only was there 2 weeks in it, but it was an incoherent message. And I guess the misdirection is here supposed to be, well, he'll take 2 weeks to decide and then he'll taco. So fine. But I think some of this, too, may have been driven by anti-taco sentiment. Let's set ourselves up for a taco, but then not taco. And then everybody will stop saying taco about me. Because of the, quote, substantial chance of negotiations, remember that, with Iran, that could bring the United States back from the brink of jumping into the war in the Middle East, President Trump's statement said he would make a decision about whether or not to strike Iran, quote, within the next 2 weeks. But, I mean, how do you... Just don't say 2 weeks and people might take it. If you said 1 week or 3, people might say, that's different. But if you say 2 weeks, it's an automatic laughter. It's a laugh track thing. Mr. Trump had been under pressure from the non-interventionist wing of his party to stay out of the conflict and was having lunch, there it is, with that day, with one of the most outspoken opponents of the bombing campaign, Stephen K. G.B. Bannon, fueling speculation that he might hold off or overeat. I'm not sure which. It was almost entirely a deception. Woo! He's very sneaky, isn't he? Now, you can talk Trump into being strategically sneaky if you say, what I'm asking you to do is have lunch. All right. Well, I want you to maintain operational security at all times. What? No, I don't understand that. I can't do it. And I got to tweet. And, well, how about this? Instead of tweet, you eat. Oh, well, now you have me. So have some lunch. All right. You got me. It was almost entirely deception. Mr. Trump had all but made up his mind, to the extent that there is one in there, to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, and the military preparations were well underway for the complex attack. Put the bombs on the planes, then fly the planes over the place, and then drop the bombs, and then it'll explode, and I'll make an announcement. Anyway, less than 30 hours after Ms. Leavitt relayed his statement, he would give the order for an assault that put the United States in the middle of the latest conflict to break out in one of the world's most volatile regions. By the way, speaking of Caroline Leavitt, I'll just throw in that apparently she took the lectern to also say, by the way, peace through strength is something that we're doing here, and that Donald Trump understands better than anybody because he coined that motto, peace through strength. No one said it before him. Very few people know this. And of course, everybody pointing out, not only have people been saying it forever, but it's actually attributed to like Roman consuls, like at this point. So, and they know which one too. And he's pissed, dead as he may be. But there you have it. Just pointing that out there. That's the level of, sycophancy, is that correct? Right? To which they'll stoop. I mean, no one had any questions about that, but to go on there, he made that up. And in fact, the word peace is actually something he coined. It's amazing. No one knew this. Anyway, so okay, fine. Mr. Trump's, quote, 2 weeks statement was just one aspect of a broader effort at political and military misdirection, that took place over 8 chaotic days, from the first Israeli strikes against Iran to the moment when a fleet of B-2 stealth bombers took off from Missouri for the first American military strikes inside Iran since that country's theocratic revolution in 1979. Okay, fine. Interviews with administration officials, Trump allies and advisors, Pentagon officials, and others familiar with the events show how, during this period, different factions of Mr. Trump's allies jockeyed to win over a president who was listing in all directions. Listing. I thought it originally said listening in all directions. Like, oh, actually that's good. No, listing in all directions. Over whether to choose war, diplomacy, or some combination. Can I have everything? 2 scoops for Donnie. Okay. Outsiders tried to define which faction was ascendant based on whom Mr. Trump met with at any given time, especially lunchtime and dinner time, I would think. Mr. Trump seemed almost gleeful in telling reporters that he could make a decision 1 second before it's due, because things change, especially with war. Grr. All the while, Mr. Trump was making blustery statements indicating he was about to take the country into the conflict. Everyone should evacuate Tehran, he wrote on Monday last week on Truth Social. Why would they do that? That's not giving anything away. The following day, he posted that he had not left a meeting of the group of 7 in Canada to broker a Middle East ceasefire, but for something, quote, much bigger. Just hint, hint every time. So he told the world, stay tuned, because he thinks the world is a television. These public pronouncements generated angst at the Pentagon and U.S. Central Command, where military planners began to worry that Mr. Trump was giving Iran too much warning about an impending strike. And now, of course, we find ourselves in the situation of, we don't know whether we destroyed the critical material because it looks from the intel, and I hate intel. That's another thing that looks from the intel like they may have moved the material because they were reading social media, and he kept saying, I'm going to do something bad, and it's going to be very explosive, and it's going to fall from the sky in Iran. I just won't say what. It's going to be a B blank bomber that does it. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. They built their own deception, the Pentagon, into the attack plan. A second group of B-2 bombers that would leave Missouri and head west over the Pacific Ocean in a way that flight trackers would be able to monitor on Saturday. That left a misimpression for many observers and presumably Iran about the timing and path of the attack, which would come from another direction entirely. But like I said, I don't know. I think the first version I read of this said that the ones who went over the Atlantic did so undetected. Not so. They were detected and posted about on social media. Okay. Anyway, the strike plan was largely in place when Mr. Trump issued his Thursday statement about how he might take up to 2 weeks to decide to go to war with Iran. Refueling tankers and fighter jets had been moved into position, and the military was working on providing additional protection for American forces stationed in the region. While the 2-week statement bought the president more time, not really, for last-minute diplomacy, military officials said the ruse and the head fake with the B-2s also had the effect of cleaning up a mess. The telegraphing of the attack that was partly of the president's making. Oh, let's just say it was entirely of the president's making and be honest about it. Asked to comment on the details of this article, Ms. Levitt said the president and his team, quote, successfully accomplished one of the most complex and historic military operations of all time. Why? No. Regarding Iran's nuclear sites, she added that many presidents have talked about this, but only President Trump has the guts to do it. The next section is a shifting tune. Mr. Trump had spent the early months of his administration warning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel against a strike on Iran, but by the morning of Friday the 13th, oh dear, in June, hours after the first Israeli attacks, Mr. Trump had changed his tune. And this is the part I think that Greg Sargent grabbed. He marveled to advisors about what he said was a brilliant Israeli military operation, which involved a series of precision strikes that killed key figures in Iran's military leadership and blasted away strategic weapons sites. Mr. Trump took calls on his cell phone, of course, from reporters and began hailing the operation as excellent and, quote, very successful, and hinting that he had much more to do with it than people realize. He's already jealous of Israel and Netanyahu. And why? Because he's getting credit for these brilliant attacks. Well, who's telling people that the attacks are brilliant? Me. And also many people. I mean, all right. But you see this dynamic? It's incredible. Later that day, Mr. Trump asked an ally how the Israeli strikes were, quote, playing. How about it in your country? How's it playing? He said that everyone, quote unquote, everyone was telling him he needed to get more involved, including potentially dropping 30,000-pound GBU-57 bombs on Fordo, the Iranian uranium enrichment facility buried underneath a mountain south of Tehran, or maybe north and east and west of Tehran. Who knows? But basically, like, okay, sure. Everyone's telling me I need to drop these bombs. Really? Are they? The next day, the president told another advisor he was leaning toward using those bunker buster bombs on Fordo while taking pride in both the bomb's destructive power and the fact that the United States is the only country that has the bomb in its arsenal. The advisor left the conversation convinced that Mr. Trump had already decided to bomb Iran's nuclear sites. I don't know how you could conclude anything else. At the same time, the president's team was closely monitoring how their most prominent supporters were reacting on social media and on television to the prospect of the United States joining the war in a more visible way. They paid close attention to the statements of Tucker Carlson, the influential podcaster and former Fox News host who was vehemently opposed to the United States joining Israel and taking on Iran. Mr. Trump became infuriated by some of Mr. Carlson's commentary and started complaining about him publicly and privately. And, you got bunker buster bombs, do something about it. Anyway, political advisors to Mr. Trump began swapping notes on various public and private polls examining the popularity of military action against Iran, noting that American support for an operation depended on, in part, how pollsters ask the question. If they ask it, people don't like it. If they don't ask it, people don't know to say they don't like it. I don't know. While polls showed that an overwhelming majority of Americans did not want the United States to go to war with Iran, most Americans also did not want Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. The president was closely monitoring Fox News, which, as others have pointed out, probably means that's a sane washing statement all by itself. As a president, you got to say, well, they're closely monitoring Fox News, which is actually quite damning. Actually, to begin with, like, why are you closely monitoring Fox News? They're not going to tell you anything factual. But that is itself, as I said, sane washing. It means the truth is Donald Trump spent his days watching television, as he always does. And that's how he made his decision, and that's bad in and of itself. But that's the way they decided to put it. The president was closely monitoring Fox News, which was airing wall-to-wall praise of Israel's military operation and featuring guests urging Mr. Trump to get more involved. Several Trump advisors lamented the fact that Mr. Carlson was no longer on Fox, which meant that Mr. Trump was not hearing much of the other side of the debate. And that's actually, probably a good point. Deliberations among administration officials about a possible American strike on Iran were in full swing by Sunday night, June 15th, but of course he would be tuned out by Sunday night. before Mr. Trump left for Canada for the G7 meeting. So, okay. Mr. Trump seemed to his advisors to be inching closer to approving a strike, even as he told them that Israel would be foolish to try to assassinate Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader. Moreover, he said if the United States were to strike Iran, the goal should be to decimate its nuclear facilities, not to bring down its government, which is why all of his proxies then went on television over the weekend once it happened and said, that's not what we're trying to do. And Trump said, actually, maybe it is. That sounds more fun. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. We got that one last segment to try to cram in more knowledge so that we can understand things and have better context for understanding things that make no sense whatsoever. But I don't know. We got to try to process things somehow. The next section of this big long article, the biggest threat to OPSEC, and that's in quotes, biggest threat to OPSEC. Who do you think it is? Yeah, probably right. By then, a small group of top military officials at the Pentagon and U.S. Central Command in Tampa had already begun refining attack plans on the Fordo facility and other Iranian nuclear sites that military planners had drawn up years ago. The planning was led by General Michael Eric. I thought his first name was Eric, but I guess he goes by Eric, but his first name's really Michael. Michael Eric Magilla, as we call him here, Kurilla, the CENTCOM commander, and General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he loves the nicknames, right? So he probably doesn't call him Magilla Kurilla, but he should. He's, Kurilla the Gorilla, and Dan Kane. Raisin Kane. We're Raisin Kane, everybody. That's a chicken strip chain, by the way. Very tough sounding. I know there's a saying behind it, but whatever. He invented that, so there you go. B-2 stealth bombers based at Whiteman, and that's funny, Whiteman Air Base in Missouri are the only warplanes capable of delivering the GBU-57 bombs without detection by Iranian radar, but that's because they're stealth bombers. They're not the only ones capable of carrying the thing, but I don't know, that's kind of stupid, but all right. The stealth bombers are the only ones capable of bombing with bombs of any size, I think, without detection, if you're going to do it from an aircraft. Maybe you can get it done with cruise missiles, but all right. Whatever. I don't know why it was important to tell them this. B-2 bomber pilots have done extensive rehearsals for extended range missions like the one before them, crossing the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, refueling multiple times before syncing up with fighter jets for the final flight leg into Iran. But even as the military planning was being conducted in secrecy, each of Mr. Trump's social media posts seemed to be telling the world what was coming. He can't, if we bomb Iran, and I don't say that I knew that we were going to bomb Iran, people will think that Stephen Miller bombed Iran. But guess what? People already think Stephen Miller. I mean, my first reaction to it when I heard that it happened was like, okay, so Stephen Miller is auto pen bombing Iran while Trump is golfing. That's not in here, but I think that was the first round of discussion that I participated in online. People just all looking at each other saying, I guess Stephen Miller is doing this now. All right. So I guess that's his way of saying, no, I'm actually the one doing it because I'm talking about it on social media. The president, said one military official, was, quote, the biggest threat to OPSEC, or operational security, that the planning faced. To build confusion into the attack plan, they decided to tell Trump about it. It's actually a very straightforward plan, Mr. President. I'm confused by it anyways. That wasn't the confusion. They mean misdirection. Military officials decided to have two groups of B-2 bombers leave Missouri around the same time, one westbound toward Guam with transponders on, so that they could be tracked by commercial satellite companies. The other group of 7 bombers, carrying a full payload of bombs with their transponders off, flew east toward Iran undetected. That is to say, undetected, I suppose, by people looking for transponder signals, but fully detected by people looking up in the sky and then blabbing. They probably should not have done that, but it's an unusual sight. Hey, there's a big giant formation of B-2 stealth bombers flying. That's crazy looking. I think I'll tell people about that. You can't hardly blame them. During a news conference on Sunday, hours after the American strike, General Kane called the Guam feint a, quote, decoy. Next up, shaping the conversation. That's the end of the whole thing. Like, well, so how did we deal with operational security? Well, the point is we had to do extra stuff to cover up that the president had already been blabbing about this operation. And then that's it. That's actually a huge problem. But what are you going to say? Shaping the conversation. Let's just move on to that. By Tuesday, June 17th, Mr. Trump had largely made up his mind to strike Iran, but he took his coercive diplomacy to a new level, issuing menacing threats over social media. We now have complete and total control over the skies over Iran, he said on Truth Social, adding, we know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He's an easy target, but is safe there. We're not going to take him out. Parentheses, kill! Exclamation point. I mean, really. At least not for now. He demanded, in all caps, unconditional surrender. Which, that would be regime change. But okay, fine, whatever. I like that too, right? We could take him out, as the mob bosses say. That means kill! Like, sir, the reason that they say things other than kill is so that when they get, when they're on trial for murder later on, they can say, I didn't say to kill him, I said take him out. Take him out to lunch, is what I meant. Yeah. Right. No, I meant to kill! Okay. By this point, several people in the anti-interventionist camp of Mr. Trump's advisors realized that they most likely could not prevent the president from hitting the Iranian nuclear facilities, so they turned their focus on trying to ensure the American war did not spiral into an expansive regime change war. That day, June 17th, Vice President JD Vance, remember that he is the vice president, posted a long series of posts on social media that many within the anti-interventionist camp interpreted as him ceding the ground for a potential U.S. military operation and preemptively defending the president's likely decision. Quote, he may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president, Mr. Vance wrote in a widely shared post. And of course, people are right to be worried about foreign entanglement after the last 25 years of idiotic foreign policy. But I believe the president has earned some trust on this issue. Well, you don't believe that, but also you are dumb. You might believe it. You're dumber than people think. I think you don't believe it, but you have to say it. And really, as vice president, you do. Prominent activists began working to shape the conversation for what was likely to come after the bombing, a debate about whether or not to engage in a war intended to bring about a new leadership in Iran. Regime change has quickly become the newly stated goal of this operation, wrote the influential activist Charlie Kirk in a social media post 2 days before the U.S. strikes. America should learn its lesson and not involve itself in a regime change war. Even as Mr. Trump was posting his own hawkish statements, he was becoming annoyed as he watched pundits on television telegraph his likely strike against Fordo. Well, duh. How did they do that? Why did they know to do that? It's you. He was infuriated when the Wall Street Journal reported that he had already given a green light to putting pieces of the operation in place, but had not given the final order. On Thursday, Mr. Trump was joined for lunch, of course, at the White House by Mr. Bannon, one of the most prominent critics of U.S. involvement in Israel's war with Iran. Some wishful thinkers in the anti-interventionist camp interpreted this meeting, lunching, as a sign that Mr. Trump was getting cold feet, i.e. tacoing. Ms. Leavitt reinforced that sentiment when she delivered Mr. Trump's statement not long after Mr. Bannon arrived at the White House, indicating that he had given himself up to 2 weeks to make a decision, a time frame he often invoked for decisions on complex issues when he had no clear plan. I guess that's almost an acknowledgement of the comedy involved. But Mr. Trump had already dictated Ms. Leavitt's statement before he met with Mr. Bannon. It was calculated misdirection, intended to buy some breathing room for the president while suggesting that no attack was imminent. Up through that point, Mr. Trump had been willing to continue to listen to those skeptical about the Iran strike and to hear arguments about its possibly dire consequences, including for oil prices, civil war in Iran, and a possible refugee crisis, in addition to the prospect of retaliatory attacks that could bring the United States into a sustained conflict. On Friday, Mr. Trump left the White House in the afternoon for a fundraising event at his club in Bedminster, New Jersey, his main summer retreat, further feeding the impression that no attack was imminent. But within hours, around 5 p.m. on Friday, Mr. Trump ordered the military to begin its Iran mission. Given the 18 hours it would take the B-2s to fly from Missouri to Iran, he knew he still had many more hours to change his mind, as he did in the last minute in 2019 when he ordered airstrikes against Iranian targets and then aborted them, because taco, I guess. But few in his administration believed he would pull back this time. Next section, last one I think, a one-off or not. A complex and highly synchronized military operation began. Many hours after the 2 fleets of B-2s took off in opposite directions, the bombers bound for Iran joined up with fighter jets and flew into Iranian airspace. American submarines launched 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles on the nuclear facilities in Natanz and Isfahan. My best guess at the pronunciation of these. As the planes approached Fordo and Natanz, the fighter jets swept up in front of the bombers and fired strikes meant to suppress any surface-to-air missiles that Iran might muster, General Kane said in the Pentagon briefing on Sunday. By the way, you could also have learned the attack plans by watching Top Gun Maverick, in case you were wondering. At 2:10 a.m. Sunday morning Iran time, the lead bomber dropped 2 of the GBU-57 bombs on the Fordo site, buried deep under a mountainside and hundreds of feet of concrete. By the end of the mission, 14 of the bunker buster bombs had been dropped, the first time they had ever been used in combat. Is that right? Pentagon officials said on Sunday that the American bombers and jet fighters never encountered any enemy fire. Hours after the American aircraft had departed Iranian airspace, Mr. Trump gave a triumphant speech at the White House, saying that the mission had, quote, completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities, so we'll never have any problems with them. Duly noted. He suggested that the war could end with this one-off mission if Iran would give up its nuclear program and negotiate. By Sunday afternoon, however, American officials had tempered the optimism of the night before, saying that Iran's nuclear facilities might have been severely damaged, but not entirely destroyed. Mr. Vance acknowledged that there are questions about the whereabouts of Iran's stock of near-bomb-grade uranium. He and Secretary of State Marco Rubio stressed that regime change in Tehran, which could mean a protracted U.S. engagement, was not the goal. But Mr. Trump, whose operation was the subject of praise in news coverage, not just from allies, but from some of his critics, had already moved on, hinting in a Truth Social post that his goal could be shifting. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, he wrote, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Oh boy. So that's very warlike. All those question marks. Yeah, that's kind of where we are. So that's, good context to try to consider what we think might come next in all of this. It's just that we just really can't know. All right. Let's see. More New York Times reporting, and I'm sorry to have to rely on New York Times for all of this, but I guess they do a great job in this sense. You come away with the impression that they're just not gonna abandon everything. They are going to give you the inside scoop that makes you say, oh my God, he's an idiot in charge of this war. But they never come out and say, he's an idiot in charge of this war. They always leave room for, maybe we'll just in the end be talking about how brilliant and awesome this war is. Like we did with the Iraq one. And like in the next piece up here, inside Trump's decision is, from the morning newsletter. And I guess, is it largely the same people here? Yeah. And I don't know exactly is this different from this? Is this just an encapsulation of everything? Yeah, that, I guess it's an encapsulation of all the various things that they have published on it. So, I guess, that's what's going on and why it was so redundant, it seemed. The first entry in the morning newsletter here, inside Trump's decision, I guess, touts the article we just read. The Times pieced together the days and hours leading up to the president's decision to strike Iran. It's a story of diplomacy, no. Deception, and a secret that almost got out. That's true. And basically, yeah, it's a recapping of what we just read. But they also then offer up, for instance, was it legal? That was the talk of a lot of the progressive online social media sphere yesterday, and a lot of disagreement about not about its illegality, but about whether or not it was going to resonate with people that it was illegal. I'm not sure, but it's well worth mentioning, and it's always worth mentioning Donald Trump and illegality in the same sentence. And for instance, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others very openly and prominently saying, look, I mean, it was illegally done. And, while we have had decades already of experience with more or less ignoring the War Powers Act and allowing presidents to get away with this stuff, they were allowed to get away with it if they did take certain legally mandated steps like notifying all of Congress on a bipartisan basis beforehand. And he's just not doing that. So it's worth pointing out it's illegal, and it's illegal in a different way that than just the I don't know. I don't know. I'm having difficulty recalling clearly whether or not anybody said, well, the methods by which people were, I think they at least thought they notified Congress and congressional leaders in compliance with national security law before launching their strikes elsewhere. Other presidents have, but they probably should have come to Congress for clearance or consultation more openly than just informing the Gang of Eight. But at any rate, this time around, Trump didn't even bother with that. And so AOC and others saying, look, this is just blatantly out of compliance and illegal and is 100%, no doubt about it, grounds for impeachment. Yes, true, and there are so many other grounds for impeachment, and just like those other grounds for impeachment, unlikely to be able to get the kind of cooperation you need to make it result in removal. But there we have it. So they do ponder whether or not it was legal. Michael Crowley and Edward Wong, who cover foreign policy, explain the constitutional principles in a longer piece here, but it is summarized as follows. The Constitution, we are reminded, Article 1 assigns Congress the power to declare war and to raise and support armies, but Article 2 designates the president as the commander-in-chief of the military. Both Republican and Democratic presidents have argued that they have the authority to order military operations without Congress. U.S. law says what? After the worst fighting in the Vietnam War, Congress tried to assert itself with the War Powers Resolution of 1973, which says that the American president must, quote, consult with Congress before introducing United States armed forces into hostilities or into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated. But presidents have ignored lawmakers, claiming a narrow definition of the introduction of forces. Congress has done little to enforce the resolution. is flying over and dropping bombs, introducing forces into the country? Yes, / no. What about international law? Some experts say the United States is permitted to act if it faces imminent attack. It's very hard, though, to see how the administration can meet that test, says Ryan Goodman, former Defense Department lawyer who now teaches at NYU's law school. American intelligence reports said that Iran had not yet decided to make a nuclear weapon. Some scholars also say Trump violated the UN Charter by attacking another member state. So there's that too. And as we mentioned earlier, Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is also a little bit on the outs here these days. Because she was, of course, saying, yeah, I'm the Director of National Intelligence, and I'm not seeing intel that indicates that there is, in fact, an imminent threat. And much of the weekend was spent by other proxies for Trump saying, I don't care, although Trump eventually came out and said it himself. I don't care what the intelligence said. Forget the intel. We're not going by intel. We're going by, as others say, as the kids say, by vibes. They were saying by gut instinct. So we have that situation developing for Tulsi Gabbard as well. There's more news, of course, as they round it up both from the Iran situation and elsewhere around the world, but just wanted to sort of point that out. And I didn't want to miss any more of the context that we're supposed to be working in here, even if it is, after all, coming from the New York Times. There's also one more Times piece here that seems important. Officials concede they don't know the fate of Iran's uranium stockpile. Both Vice President JD Vance and Rafael Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, acknowledged questions about the whereabouts of Iran's stockpile of near-bomb-grade nuclear material. Oh no, that sounds kind of bad. David Sanger wrote that piece. Let's see if we can race through at least a bit of it here. And if not, or if so, well, we got another explainer thread available to us if we need more context. A day after President Trump declared that Iran's nuclear program had been completely and totally obliterated by American bunker-busting bombs and a barrage of missiles, the actual state of the program seemed far more murky, with senior officials conceding they did not know the fate of Iran's stockpile of near-bomb-grade uranium. We are going to work in the coming weeks to ensure that we do something with that fuel, and that's one of the things that we're going to have conversations with the Iranians about, Vice President JD Vance told ABC this week on Sunday, referring to a batch of uranium sufficient to make 9 or 10 atomic weapons. Nonetheless, he contended that the country's potential to weaponize that fuel had been set back substantially because it no longer had the equipment to turn that fuel into operative weapons. The Iranians have made it clear they're not interested in having conversations with the United States, accusing Washington of deceiving Tehran during the last set of negotiations while planning the air attack. Moreover, that stockpile of fuel is now one of the few nuclear bargaining chips in Iranian hands. In a briefing for reporters on Sunday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, avoided Trump's maximalist claims of success. Why? They said an initial battle damage assessment of all 3 sites struck by Air Force B-2 bombers and Navy Tomahawk missiles showed severe damage and destruction. Satellite photographs of the primary target, the Fordo uranium enrichment plant that Iran built under a mountain, showed several holes where a dozen 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrators, one of the largest conventional bombs in the U.S. arsenal, punched deep holes in the rock. The Israeli military's initial analysis concluded that the site, the target of American and Israeli military planners for more than 26 years, sustained serious damage from the strike but had not been completely destroyed. Oh no. But there was also evidence, according to 2 Israeli officials with knowledge of the intelligence, that Iran had moved equipment and uranium from the site in recent days. Maybe because he was tweeting that he was going to bomb it. And there was growing evidence that the Iranians, attuned to Mr. Trump's repeated threats to take military action, had removed 400 kilograms, or roughly 880 pounds of uranium enriched to 60% purity. That is just below the 90% that is usually used in nuclear weapons. Although I'd say it's like about a third below, so I don't know. The 60% enriched fuel had been stored deep inside another nuclear complex near the ancient capital of Isfahan. Rafael Mariano Grossi, the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, said by text that the fuel had last been seen by his teams of UN inspectors about a week before Israel began its attacks. In an interview on CNN on Sunday, he added that, quote, Iran has made no secret that they have protected this material. Asked by text later in the day whether he meant the fuel stockpile, which is stored in special casks small enough to fit in the trunks of about 10 cars, had been moved, he replied, I do. That appeared to be the mystery about the fuel's fate. That appeared to be the mystery. Yeah, okay, that Mr. Vance was discussing. If so, Isfahan would not be the only place where the custodians of the Iranian nuclear program, a subject of nationalistic pride and a symbol of Iran's ability to defend itself, were trying to move equipment and material out of sight and harden the Fordo plant to protect what had to stay in place. Satellite images by Maxar Technologies. Why do they get an ad in this? I don't know. At the tunnels leading to the Fordo Mountain, taken in days before the American strike, show 16 cargo trucks positioned near an entrance. That seems odd. An analysis by the Open Source Center in London suggested that Iran may have been preparing the site for a strike. It is unclear exactly what, if anything, was removed from the facility. In fact, there was only so much the Iranians could save. The giant centrifuges that spin at supersonic speeds, purifying uranium, are piped together and bolted to the cement floor. One U.S. official said it would have been unrealistic to completely move equipment out of Fordo after the conflict with Israel began. The official added that historical documents about the nuclear program were buried deep in the bowels of the site, likely complicating any efforts to reconstituting it. In coming days, both the Iranians and intelligence agencies expect to learn more about the Natanz enrichment site, which is older, larger, and less well protected than Fordo. It was struck by the Israelis repeatedly, and they destroyed an above-ground enrichment center and disrupted the electrical system. Mr. Grossi later said he believed the interruption of the electrical supply could have sent the centrifuges spinning out of control, probably destroying all of them. That's something Greg mentioned last week, right? How long would it take the Iranians to repair and replace that equipment? Unknown. It would probably stretch for years, but Iran is also building a new deep replacement for Natanz in the south of the city. Officials in Tehran have told the IAEA that they have not yet opened the plant, so there's nothing to see. If Iran is truly pursuing a nuclear weapon, which officially it denies, it is taking more time than any nuclear-armed nation in history. The United States developed the Manhattan Project in 4 years or so, developing the bombs dropped, of course, at Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the war in the Pacific. The Soviet Union conducted the first test in 1949. Only 4 years later, India, Pakistan, and Israel all sped the process. Why taking so long then for Iran, you might ask? The Iranians have been at it for more than 20 years, and an archive of data stolen from a Tehran warehouse by Israel a number of years ago showed that Iranian engineers were exploring nuclear triggers and other equipment that would only be used to detonate a weapon. That was around 2003 when, according to American intelligence, the engineers received instructions to halt work on weaponization. Comments by Trump and Netanyahu in recent days suggest that they believe the work is resumed, though no evidence to support that contention has been made public. If so, the strikes on Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan may only reinforce the view among Iranian leaders that they need a weapon for survival of the government. History also suggests that diplomacy has usually been more effective than sabotage or military attacks in providing assurances that a country does not pursue atomic weapons. More than 15 years ago, the joint U.S.-Israeli attack on Natanz, using a sophisticated cyber weapon, caused about a fifth of the country's 5,000 or so centrifuges to blow up. But the Iranians not only rebuilt, they installed more sophisticated equipment. Before Israel's attack this month, they had roughly 19,000 centrifuges in operation. It was only when the Obama administration struck the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran that the United States got a fuller picture of its capabilities thanks to the work of inspectors. And those inspectors were then choked off and many security cameras disabled after Trump declared the nuclear accord a disaster and withdrew from it. Just letting you know. All right, Tehran's reaction was to scale up centrifuge production, enrich uranium at levels only weapons states need, and stonewall the IAEA. And now it's unclear whether the team of IAEA inspectors who were in the country when the conflict with Israel broke out, will be permitted by the Iranian government to resume their inspections, which would include verifying the whereabouts and safety of that bomb-grade uranium. All international inspections teams have been suspended during wartime, Iranian officials have said, and if they were to resume, it's unclear that the inspectors could physically gain access to the bombed Fordo underground plant anyway, or the wreckage of the larger enrichment facilities at Natanz. Mick Mulroy, a former Pentagon official in the first Trump administration and former CIA officer, said of the strike, with the type and amount of munitions used, it will likely set back the Iranian nuclear weapon program 2 to 5 years. And remember that Greg said that the big criticism of the Iran deal with Iran was it only set them back 15 years. So, whatever. I'm sure it's just fine this time around. So, very interesting, good context. I did mention to you that there was other material to look at, of course, and there's a thread, maybe I can just sort of include it, that I have parked in pocket somewhere. I just don't have the time to go and grab it, but a national security weapons type wonky guy who sort of summarized his own let's say discussion of what was likely accomplished and what you should and shouldn't expect in terms of bouncing back by the Iranians. Here it is. I've got it here. I'll just give you the name and the start of it here. Jeffrey Lewis, or Arms Control Wonk on Blue Sky. Why am I so unimpressed by these strikes, he asks, and then launches a 17-part thread explaining why. Maybe we can discuss that tomorrow, because now it's time to hand the mic over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Lots happening, of course, and he'll be reporting on how Trump was dealt a stinging rebuke by the judge in the latest Garcia hearing. And ICE detained a Marine Corps veteran's wife who was still breastfeeding their baby. They really don't seem to care about this. And why they switched out of those yellow and black Fred Perry uniforms, I do not understand. We'll see you tomorrow.